Imagine this: one tap on a remote, and an entire flotilla of yuppie boats grinds to a halt, engines coughing like they'd swallowed lake water, while overdressed diners in khakis and boat shoes flail like they're auditioning for a bad reality show. That's exactly what unfolded on that balmy evening at Willow Creek Reservoir, when I finally dropped the steel barrier across my family's ancient pier, turning a supposed community asset into a floating farce of entitlement. But oh, the sweet irony. As the sheriff's lights danced across the ripples, I couldn't help but smirk, knowing this chaos was just the appetizer in a feast of comeuppance for the HOA queen who'd turned our quiet suburb into her personal fiefdom. It all started innocently enough, or so it seemed, in the sleepy cul-de-sacs of Willow Creek Estates, a slice of American suburbia where the lawns were manicured to within an inch of their lives and the air hummed with the subtle oppression of neighborhood covenants. You'd think a place like this, with its picket fences, weekend barbecues, and kids biking in endless loops, would be a haven from the world's nonsense. But no. Beneath the veneer of potluck dinners and holiday lights lurked the iron fist of the Homeowners Association, enforcing rules so petty they could make a grown man weep over the height of his mailbox. I was Emily Hayes, the so-called recluse of Lot 47, the one neighbors whispered about because I didn't join the book club or volunteer for the annual garage sale. Truth was, I'd inherited the old family home after my parents passed, complete with the private pier jutting into the reservoir, a rickety wooden relic my grandfather had hammered together back in '52, when the subdivision was just a muddy dream. Folks said I was standoffish, maybe even a bit unhinged, for keeping to myself and letting the pier weather naturally instead of slapping on fresh paint every spring. Rumors flew. Emily's hoarding junk out there, or she's probably running some shady operation. I heard it all through the grapevine, the kind that twisted faster than kudzu in these parts. But I stayed quiet, sipping my coffee on the back porch, watching the water lap at the pilings, biding my time. Little did they know, I was observing everything, every nosy glance, every whispered judgment with the patience of a spider in its web. Then came Victoria Blaine, the HOA president who'd swept into office like a Category 5 hurricane in pearls. Victoria, or Vicky the Enforcer, as I'd later dub her in my private notes, was the epitome of suburban tyranny wrapped in a smile. She moved into the neighborhood from some upscale condo in the city, touting her vision for elevating community standards. First, it was small stuff, fining old Mr. Jenkins for his overgrown hedges, mandating that all trash bins be color-coordinated. But her eyes soon locked on my pier. Underutilized potential, she called it at the first board meeting I bothered to attend, her voice dripping with that faux sympathetic tone reserved for charity cases. Emily, dear, think of the children. We could turn this into a shared dock, maybe even a little event space. It's practically begging for modernization. I sat in the back row of the community center, arms crossed, as she flashed PowerPoint slides of glossy renderings, a floating pavilion bobbing on the water, complete with string lights, cocktail hours, and, get this, a revenue-generating rental scheme for boat slips. The crowd murmured approval, swayed by her talk of boosting property values and fostering unity. But I saw through the veneer. This wasn't about community. It was about control, about turning my grandfather's legacy into her profit machine. It's private property, I said calmly when she opened the floor for questions. Deeded to my family since before the HOA existed. Victoria's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed just a fraction. Oh, Emily, history is so quaint. But informal use over the years could imply easement rights. We're just exploring options for the greater good. The room chuckled nervously, as if I were the cranky holdout spoiling the fun. Whispers followed me out. There goes Emily, always the loner. I didn't argue. Not yet. I just filed it away, like a squirrel stashing nuts for winter. The whispers turned to outright smears soon after. At the next coffee clatch, which I overheard from my fence line, Victoria painted me as the neighborhood villain. Poor Emily's been through a lot, but clinging to that eyesore Pier, the selfish, really, blocking progress for everyone. By week's end, flyers appeared in mailboxes. Support Lake Enhancement Initiative. Don't let one holdout sink our future. Attached were photos of my pier, angled to look dilapidated, with captions hinting at safety hazards and environmental neglect. I found one crumpled in my recycling bin, courtesy of a concerned neighbor. It stung. Sure, being branded the bad guy in your own backyard, but I kept my cool. Instead, I dusted off the old deed from the attic, yellowed pages crisp with legal jargon, and started cross-referencing with county records online. Patience, I reminded myself. Let her dig her own grave. Sure enough, the digging began literally. One crisp morning, I spotted 3 figures in fluorescent vests poking around the water's edge, tape measures snapping like whips. HOA Improvement Committee, their badges read. They weren't locals. These were pros, cataloging every splinter on my pier, pacing distances with the precision of land sharks. Can I help you? I called from the porch, keeping my tone neutral. The lead guy glanced up from his tablet. Just assessing for upgrades, ma'am. President Blaine authorized it. Upgrades? My pier wasn't theirs to upgrade. Before I could press, heels clicked on the gravel path, Victoria, in a blazer sharper than her tongue, sweeping in like she owned the view. Emily, perfect timing. She cooed, gesturing grandly at the reservoir. We're prepping for the pavilion project. The board voted to integrate lake access points for community benefit. Integrate, I echoed, stepping closer. This pier's been family-owned for generations. Her eyes flicked to the survey stakes they'd just planted, as if the ground itself were negotiable. Ah, but the history's a tad fuzzy, dear. Years of neighborly use, picnics, fishing spots that could qualify as prescriptive rights. We're doing this for unity. You know, unity, my foot. It was a land grab dressed in HOA jargon, delivered with that saccharine smile that made you want to check for cavities. I didn't yell, I just nodded. Informal use doesn't erase a deed, but she was already turning away, barking orders at the crew like I was yesterday's newsletter. That afternoon, after they packed up, I strolled the boundary line, the one my dad had walked with me as a kid, pointing out the old iron markers buried under ivy. At the edge near the willows, the soil was disturbed, fresh dirt turned over, leaves brushed aside like someone had poked around and tried to cover their tracks. Not the crew, they'd been blatant. This was sneaky, evaluative. Someone, Victoria, no doubt, was testing if those markers could be adjusted. My blood simmered, but I snapped photos, documented the timestamps. Let her think I was the oblivious recluse. Inside, the web was tightening. The next day, HOA volunteers, 2 eager beavers in matching polo shirts, set up camp near the pier's entrance, clipboard in hand. Families pulling up with coolers and fishing poles were hit with the news. New maintenance fee, $20 per launch, per HOA guidelines. I watched from my window as a dad with his toddler daughter hesitated. Wallet out. But we've always used this spot for free. The volunteer shrugged. Times change. It's for improvements. The dad turned away, the little girl's face crumpling. Maybe next weekend. Sweetie. It was heartbreaking, infuriating, turning a simple joy into a toll booth. And hilarious in its absurdity. If you squinted, grown adults charging rent on someone else's backyard like playground bullies with a lemonade stand. I confronted Victoria the following morning as she supervised from her golf cart. You can't collect fees here. This isn't HOA land. She folded her arms, that smile tightening into a smirk. The board approved it. Emily. If you'd attend meetings, you'd have a say. You can't vote to own private property. Her response, patronizing sigh. This neighborhood needs vision, consistency. Your little pier's been neglected, frankly. It's an eyesore confusing everyone. Neglected? I'd resealed the wood every fall, replaced pilings after storms. But arguing with her was like debating a pamphlet. She only heard her own script. 2 days later, the sheriff rolled up my drive, not for tea, but with a harassment complaint from Victoria. Intimidating volunteers, creating hostility. He read off, looking apologetic. By standing on my own pier? He sighed. Gotta document it. Ma'am. I let him, adding my own notes about trespass. Victoria was escalating, but so was my dossier. That night, poring over the deed under a desk lamp, I traced the lines unchanged since Eisenhower. The HOA could fine and fuss, but they couldn't erase ink in county records. Not legally. Which meant Victoria was bending rules, and that disturbed soil was her first slip. The real question gnawing at me, what was she plotting with those markers? I didn't wait long for the answer. The rumble hit at dawn 3 days later, not thunder, but heavy engines churning the shore into mud. I bolted to the window, barges on the water, cranes swinging pontoons, workers in hard hats swarming my pier like ants on a picnic. It wasn't subtle. It was an invasion, turning my quiet inlet into a construction zone. Diesel fumes choked the air, silt blooming in the water like dirty secrets surfacing. Who authorized this? I demanded of the foreman, dodging a swinging beam. He barely glanced up. HOA President Blaine said this pier's cleared for access. He waved a clipboard of unsigned docs. Not hers to clear, I shot back. Sir, I just follow orders. By midday, the floating pavilion's frame loomed, oversized, gaudy, like a Vegas barge plopped in suburbia. Trucks lined the road, HOA goons charging $20 fees to bewildered locals. I watched a mom with twins turn away, kids' life jackets dangling. We can't afford that. Her whisper carried, sorry, guys. It hardened something in me. This wasn't progress. It was privatization of peace, one nickel and dime at a time. Evening brought the sheriff again, complaint in hand. Confronting workers, threatening the project. I laughed bitterly. By asking questions on my land? He rubbed his neck. She's filing faster than I can keep up. Then document this. Every barge crossed my line without permission. Next morning, the boundary markers showed fresh tracks, chalk lines snaking toward the water. Not construction noise. This was prep for a legal heist. I called a huddle with a few trusted neighbors that afternoon. Sarah from down the street clenched her coffee mug. She told us at the meeting your peers under review by the county. Lie, I said. No one's reviewed a thing. Tom, the retired vet, nodded. She's restructuring the whole damn neighborhood. Starting with you. We swapped stories, her fines, her smears, the Mia my hitting hard. A woman preaching community, while pitting us against each other. That night, as the pavilion lights blared like a bad infomercial, I knew the fight was on. Victoria wasn't pushing boundaries. She was erasing them. And the irony? In her quest for control, she'd handed me the tools to dismantle her throne. The escalation hit like a bad sequel, predictable yet absurd in its over-the-top flair. Victoria's pavilion grew daily, beams clanging, workers blasting classic rock to drown out complaints. But her real weapon was paperwork, a blizzard of complaints painting me as the neighborhood pariah. Hostile environment, one read. Obstructing progress. The sheriff became a regular, his visits as routine as the mailman. Another one, Emily, he'd say, hat in hand. She's claiming you threatened her volunteers. By waving from my porch? The quip, signing the form with a flourish. He chuckled wearily. This is getting ridiculous. Ridiculous was right, like a sitcom where the villain monologues while tying herself in knots. Neighbors started avoiding me, eyes darting away at the grocery store. Heard you're fighting the pavilion, one whispered. Victoria says it'll tank our home values if you win. I smiled thinly. Funny, she didn't mention it's built on my lake bed. Eyes widened, seeds planted. But Victoria amped the smear. Social media posts from concerned residents, her aliases. No doubt, calling me the Pier hoarder, who hates kids and community. HOA den kicked in me, the villain for defending what's mine, while she played savior with stolen goods. I stayed silent publicly, but privately, I dug deeper. County records revealed her expedited permits, rubber-stamped without environmental checks. Her business address listed as my Pier. Fraud. Plain as day. And that loan? $250,000 against HOA assets. No vote. Embezzlement wrapped in vision. One evening, as cranes groaned, I met with Lena, a sharp attorney neighbor. This isn't zoning, she said, scanning docs. It's a scheme. She's leveraged community property for her gain. We mapped the underwater rights. My deed extended 40 feet into the reservoir. If her anchors hit that, Lena trailed. I called in Jake, the local diver with sonar gear. We motored out at dusk, the pavilion's lights mocking us. Sonar pinged. Anchors drilled 15 feet into my submerged land. Trespass jackpot, Jake whistled. Evidence stacked. Photos, affidavits, a folder thick as a novel. Victoria's retaliation peaked at an emergency HOA meet. She strutted in, slides ready, my Pier as obstacle, her pavilion as salvation. Emily's selfishness endangers our future, she declared, voice quivering with fake passion. Murmurs rose. I stepped up. Vision or theft? I laid out exhibits. Fraudulent loan, tampered markers, missing permits, underwater trespass. Gasps echoed. Victoria sputtered. Manipulated data. Jake stood. I dove it myself. Chaos brewed. Her calm shattered into a low bitch tantrum. You can't stop progress. Doors swung. Judge Harlan entered, docs in hand. I've reviewed allegations, fraud, trespass, operations suspended. Sheriff cuffed her mid-rant. This lake needs me, as she pleaded. Emily, partner, 50%. I stayed silent. Accountability, not revenge. The room erupted in relieved cheers, her empire crumbling in real time. In the aftermath, the pavilion sat dark, a floating joke. Salvage crews arrived, cranes lifting the beast as neighbors cheered, water cascading like tears of relief. Anchors yanked free, revealing scars on my land, proof of her impalement. The HOA dissolved in a unanimous vote. No more petty tyrants. Families returned to the pier. Free launches, laughter echoing. I restored the annual picnic. Hot dogs sizzling, kids splashing. Sunset on the dock, feet dangling. I whispered, "It's ours again." Lena handed the ruling. Charges stuck. Restitution ordered. Victoria vanished. Ambitions trucked away. But here's the kicker. Was the HOA's modernization a bold vision for unity, or just entitled overreach masking greed, true or false?